I'm Russ Hamburger, Associate Provost. Want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving holiday, and we're all refreshed and ready to go again. A lot has happened since the last time that we met to discuss state authorization. So we wanted to give you a progress report and some additional information that will be helpful as we face this task together. Among the group today, I know are people with whom we have been dealing with on this issue for the last couple of years, and some new folks. So if those who are familiar and with whom we have been working will bear with me for a minute, I want to give just for the benefit of those who are new to the subject, a brief sort of overview of state authorization before I turn the meeting over to Brianna. A few years ago, with the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, one of the proposed regulations required that institutions of higher education get approval from every state in which they had some kind of educational activity. Due to a court case, that regulation was put on hold, although the feds are now trying to reintroduce it. But in that progress, institutions of higher ed discovered that states already had regulations that required that that governed institutions of higher ed from out of the state that had activity within their state. This came out of the consumer protection concerns, and originally it was thought that it had to do with distance education, but it was discovered that in the process that the governing precept was something called physical presence, and physical presence meant different things in different states. It could refer to having a resident of that state enrolled in a distance ed program. It could refer to some non-classroom experience like a internship or clinical experience in that state, to having distance ed faculty living in that particular state, to marketing or advertising in that state, to proctoring exams in that state. And every state defines what the sort of trigger for physical presence is differently. Every state has different processes, different fees. There's no consistency as to what their rules and regulations are. Many states have severe penalties for not complying with these regulations. So what would it mean if we weren't in compliance, where we had a student enrolled in a distance ed program, or a student doing a required internship, or proctoring an exam in another state? First thing, obviously, is embarrassment, that we are publicly found not to be in compliance with some state rules. Secondly, and this has happened to some institutions, having to immediately withdraw students from that state. That could mean that there was a case of an institution that was sending students in a nursing program to another state that they were close to and where there were more facilities without getting proper approvals, and they had to withdraw all of those students. That has a potential, obviously, for a lawsuit by students if they spent money to rent an apartment or spent other money. And some states have fines, severe fines. So the state of Maryland has a minimum fine of $20,000. They recently fined an institution that was not in compliance $100,000. There's another institution that had put up a billboard in a state where marketing and advertising was a trigger, and they were fined $500 a day till they got the billboard down. President Sexton could get arrested. Actually, that wouldn't happen, but there's a state in which anybody who knew, anybody at the institution who knew of that state's regulation, and if the institution was in violation, any person would be charged with a misdemeanor. So there are lots of severe, as I said, severe penalties that could occur. Complicating this is the fact that there's a difference between getting permission for someone to apply for a license in another state and getting approval from that state to actually have someone do an internship or clinical experience there. So 2 years ago, when this came to our attention, NYU made a decision that we would become 100% compliant. We brought Brianna on board to help us navigate through this process, and we've been working on what is a long and complex process. So what we're going to talk about today is first to give you a status report on where we are in getting compliance. Secondly, to talk about the issue of continuing education units, which has come to our, we've had a case recently. Give you some updates on how we can manage the process of state authorization. One of the issues that came up is the issue of the internships and keeping track of internships. We've had conversations with the PeopleSoft because we thought we could develop some kind of system there. That didn't work. We then went to the Wasserman Center, and we're delighted that Trudy Steinfeld and Rich Orba-Austin, who you'll hear from in a moment, have been working with us to use their current system to develop a means at which we can keep track of students going to other states for internships to make sure we are in compliance and we can know where we need to seek authorization. After that, we'll take a brief break, and then a very brief break, and then we will talk about the 2 states that we're focusing on this year, North Carolina and Maryland. So at that point, if that is not an issue for you or your school, obviously you're not obligated to stay, but anyone for whom that could be a matter of concern, who might be sending students to those states for internships or any of the other sort of physical presence items, would be important for you to stay, and we'll work through that today. So let me turn the meeting over to Brianna. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you everyone again for being here today with us. So first I want to update you on the status of state authorization compliance for New York University. In 2012, we were at 0% compliance. The issue had just come to our attention, and we were beginning to kind of sift through the complexities within the regulations. In 2013, we were at 55% compliance, and we're currently at 66% compliance. These numbers come out of a calculation from 80 different regulatory bodies. Some states have more than one agency that regulates this kind of activity, depending on the legislation and the charge of the offices within the respective states. So for continuing education units, this is something that recently came to our attention. That's a major compliance issue, specifically if your unit is offering CEUs through distance education. I know a lot of the units do have activity like that, or they're just beginning discussions of moving their current CEU offerings to a distance education format. So this is just something that we wanted to share so that you could be aware as you have those discussions to make sure that it makes sense and that you're in compliance if you do choose to go that direction or are currently offering CEUs via distance education. So there are 13 states right now that regulate such activity, and of those, NYU is compliant in about half. So currently the restrictions will be in Alabama, Alaska, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Utah, and Wisconsin. So what this means is if you have an enrollment site or your site with information on your CEUs, you should add a disclaimer that says, you know, unfortunately right now NYU cannot enroll students from these states, and go ahead and list the states. And a lot of students are writing letters to their congressman, to their home state's Department of Education to say, I want to go to this program and I can't, and there's a lot of movement in the states on what they're doing for regulations, and we're working as quickly as we can to come into compliance so that all of the restrictions can be lifted for all of our programs. So we do have a plan, like Russ said, to become 100% compliant. So in the next 1 to 3 years, all of the restrictions will be lifted and you'll be able to enroll students from any state that they desire to enroll from. For managing state authorization within your units, it is tedious and it is a lot of information and it is new and even to me very overwhelming at times. So I completely understand that you'll have a lot of questions and concerns and a lot of oddities within your units. You know, we have this, we have that. It's sort of like this, but it's not. And that's fine. That's what we expect and that's what we're here for. So we've developed a newsletter that we're putting out. We're going to try and do it twice a year now to keep you updated on where we are, where we're going, and any new issues that come up related to state authorization, just to keep everybody in the loop. I know a lot of you in this room may have gotten our most recent newsletter that went out in late September, and a lot of it, feel free to pass it around, forward it to colleagues if the activity pertains to them. We really encourage you to forward it on to anybody who has marketing activity or any field placement coordinators. There's a lot of rich information within the newsletters that definitely pertain to that kind of position or activity. Secondly, we have state authorization liaisons within each school, and previously this just evolved sort of naturally with who we were working with within each school, and through the program approval process, it was some people would bring it to us and it wouldn't always be the same person. So we've just kind of identified to help people navigate and stay in the loop within their school, a state authorization liaison within each unit that you can go to, who will be updated on the information, who can come to us to ask questions, and they'll be a little bit more informed than the average person on the state authorization compliance issues. So that's a great starting point if you're talking about making any changes to current program offerings. For instance, you want to add an internship or you want to take the program online. That's a great starting point within your school to go to and kind of pick their brain a little bit, and from there they can come to us or you can come to us. It's absolutely an open door policy. Please feel free. And we also added this year a state authorization activity form to the program approval website. It's a page-and-a-half form that probably takes about 3 minutes to complete, and it summarizes any activity that could trigger a need for state authorization approval to make sure that as program changes and new programs evolve, we're aware of them and we can take them through the appropriate approvals within each state that they need to have approval in to make sure that everybody stays in compliance. And so that's on our website, and I can bring it up at the end and show everyone what it looks like, or we can speak further about it if you guys have any questions. And then we're always available for meetings or presentations. I know a couple of you have already asked us to come in to your schools and present at a dean's meeting or have a small meeting with field placement coordinators within various units or with chairs, and we're happy to do that. It's a complex regulatory environment to explain, and if it makes more sense for you or is easier for you to have Russ and myself come in and just have a discussion or a chat or provide some materials to help with that process, we're happy to do that. So for data tracking and activity, a lot of you have expressed just a want for help, that this is very burdensome, that you don't have a system right now to track where your students are doing their internships, and to create one, where do you begin, what do you ask? So as Russ mentioned, we originally looked into maybe Albert and the PeopleSoft system, and it was determined that that was not going to be an easy route. So then we partnered with Wasserman Career Center and came up with a tool that I think will work wonderfully for a lot of the units for tracking this kind of information. So I'd just like to add that the tool that we've created, unfortunately, is not amendable. The items are set, and it's specifically to take care of the compliance issue that we're all facing. So I know a lot of schools like to really look for a place to gather data about their students and their students' activity, and you should absolutely still continue to gather that from your respective units through the ways that you've already developed to do that. But for this specific tool, it's really focused and geared towards the compliance issue that we're all facing. So I'd like to introduce to you now Richard Orb Austin. He is the director of the Graduate Student Center Development at the Wasserman Career Center. The tool will also be available to undergraduate and graduate students. So Rich does represent the graduate area, but it's for everybody. So Rich.
Good afternoon. So this is month 4 for me, so I'm excited to be here. I know I haven't met a good deal of you. So again, by way of introduction, I'm Richard Orbe-Austin. I am the Director of the new Graduate Student Career Development Center here at Wasserman. So we're excited to be able to partner with you all, with the Office of the Vice Provost, the Associate Provost, and Brianna, to make sure that the needs of authorization are met. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the tool that we're proposing to use, and then to actually demonstrate it to you as well. So the tool we're using is something called NYU CareerNet. So Wasserman works for the most part with undergraduates, but we will also be transitioning and working with graduate students to make sure that we're tracking their internship and full-time job placement. So as students go through internships or full-time jobs, we ask that they report it out to us. It's a voluntary process. We hope to, and we tend to report out both full-time jobs and internship progress for our students. As I said, we're working on a graduate component. We have historically worked on undergraduate. But the tool we'll be using will cover all the needs of all your respective schools, both undergraduate and graduate. So NYU CareerNet is the tool. So if you go to the Wasserman website, nyu.edu/career development, you will see down below NYU CareerNet, and it's an opt-in for your students. So the students would go in and register and then develop a profile. Once they've developed the profile, I will show you what it looks like. So I'm logging in right now as a student, and once they develop the profile, in order to be able to report out their placement, they would go to profile and go to placement, and then simply hit report placement. If they've had a placement before, it would pop up. If not, you would hit add new, and then this would be the field that would pop up first. So we would look to see, for the most part, it would be internships, practicum, things of that nature. So as Brianna talked about, we're in the process of making sure that the fields that are needed for state authorization are formatted in such a way that once you do go into this particular tool, all the particular items will be there. So if we hit internship, just for the sake of going through the process, you will see that the students then need to report out particular items. So the employer name, the job title, position, industry, function. We'll have an opportunity to have them report out the state in which they're performing, they are completing their internship, their practicum, other types of educational activities that are relevant to this initiative. We want to know about compensation, resources we'll talk about, and then how they secure the position, how long they search for the position. Those are items that are relevant for our particular reporting needs. But this will be, once they go through this process, they report it out, and then how we will work with Brianna and the Vice Provost and the Associate Provost is that we'll be able to extract the data for the respective schools, and then Brianna can then use that data for her reporting purposes. Okay. So that, in a nutshell, is really the straightforward process of the tool. We anticipate that it should be pretty straightforward, but that the role that we will play is to provide the portal, but the role that the respective schools and other stakeholders is really getting the students to opt into this process and really helping them to be aware of it and making sure that they follow through.
And the next thing that we're going to be discussing is state authorization in 2 specific states, North Carolina and Maryland. And I know that a lot of you here have already completed the paperwork, and that's great, thank you. And you absolutely do not have to stay for this portion of the meeting if you've already done that. If you have not, and you think that your program might need to, or you have an interest in learning more about what it looks like and how we can help you complete it, please do stay, and I'll hand out copies, we'll pull it up, and we'll kind of talk through some of your questions. And just to give some clarity on who it might pertain to, for both North Carolina and Maryland, they require documentation at a programmatic level. So a lot of the states our office has been able to go through and do on an institutional level, fill out general university data, and take care of the authorization on behalf of all the units. For these 2 specific states, they're 2 of the most difficult within the landscape of authorizations, and they require programmatic reports and some details at a program level that our office just would not be able to complete without your help. So we do need to, we have been asking, and we do need to ask that your units help us and work together to fill out that information. If there's 15 standards, there might be 4 that we need you to fill in, and then we'll embed them into the larger report and edit them so that they speak to the language that the regulators are working for. And from there will be programmatic reviews, and for North Carolina, a site visit that will come to our home campus. That once it gets to the site visit point, the schools will not be involved. It's not so much like a middle states or accreditation visit. It really bounces back to institutional level at that point. But if you have not filled out forms for your programs with required non-classroom experiences for these 2 states at this point, we ask that you stay on so that we can share with you what that process looks like. And just to be clear, if a program does have a required non-classroom experience right now and they choose not to go through that process, they will not be able to have their students do the non-classroom experience in North Carolina or Maryland moving forward. We have to go through the process as an entire university. Okay, thank you everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started on the next portion of things with North Carolina and Maryland. I'm happy to see that you guys stayed to hang out with us. So I'm just going to pass around some of the sample forms, and then we can go ahead and ask questions and go through them and discuss them together. So for North Carolina, the application process is a little funky because it has to go through as an entire university. So we all have to be ready at the same time and submit all of our materials together as one unit. So it's just a little bit of shuffling and coordinating to make that happen. So we're holding the submission right now. A lot of units did submit reports to us from a few programs within their school or from all the programs, but we realized through conversations that there were a couple lingering and we didn't want to leave anybody out. So we paused and we thought we would use this opportunity to open a dialogue about if you have some activity that needs to go through for approval with the university application. So for North Carolina, you guys should all have a packet. It's about 10 pages, and in that packet there is language. There's some writing in black and some writing in orange, and the orange is stuff that you can just leave alone. That's stuff that our office will fill out on your behalf. It's going to be the same for everybody. The stuff in black are standards that you need to write to depending on the activity that your respective program has. So it might ask for a list of faculty and what degree the faculty has. So you can do a matrix. I always encourage you to insert web links when possible. I know a lot of you do a lot of work and a lot of time on your websites to be forward-facing and transparent with potential students or current students to say, these are our amazing faculty, these are their credentials, this is what they're researching. So if you have a link to a page that has all of your faculty listed, go ahead and, you can go ahead and just insert that link there, and that'll save a lot of time. You don't need to create an elaborate appendix or matrix or anything like that. So anytime it's already compiled, just do what's easy as long as the information's there. So the language within the report is a little odd. The laws haven't quite caught up with the interpretation in terms of language. So the form actually reads as if our school is located in North Carolina because it was originally written to pertain to schools in North Carolina before the education industry started doing distance education and sending students places to encourage them to increase their experiences cross borders. So the language might be a little confusing at times, and we tried to write some instructions to denote that in the beginning just as a friendly reminder as you work through, because it can get a little gray and a little confusing. So just be aware of that as you read through these. It might say, your North Carolina-based dorms, and we can't take that out because we need to submit that, so we would just be taking it out and putting it back in, which would be a lot of work. So we just left it in and thought we'd share that with you, so just omit that as you read and read it as if it says New York-based. And we're definitely available. We've read a lot of drafts for individual programs and we've made improvements. I've physically gone down and had a meeting with the state regulator in North Carolina, and I had a lengthy discussion about what kind of language they're looking for, what kind of information they're looking for to speak to the standards to make sure that we fulfill the accurate requirements. And I'm happy to read a draft, or if you just don't know how to begin to answer a question, feel free to call me and I can share an example of what another school did, or kind of brainstorm with you a little bit about what you could put there. And there are absolutely instances that are just not applicable to your unit, and it's okay to just write not applicable. We do not offer distance education in our school, or whatever kind of activity they're asking about. So don't be afraid to just say, we don't do this. Don't stress out about having to fill in a blank that just really doesn't apply. And then in general, we'd like to ask that by December 8th, you commit to doing the application for your program. So it's not that you have to have the materials completed by December 8th, but that by December 8th we know that your program has intent to complete the program. And we can talk a little bit more about what the deadline from there will look like. Most programs have been able to pull it together in 1 to 2 weeks. It's a lot of information that you already have on your website or in other documents, and it's just a matter of moving it sometimes. There's a little bit of new information that you might need to write to or speak to, but a lot of it is pre-existing. So it looks very overwhelming at first, but sometimes with just some time and thought, we all realize that, oh, we can pull this from here, or this is on our website, here's the link. So that's really worked out well for us. So the Maryland program approval is the more colorful one with the yellow box on the page. And Maryland does program reports, but Maryland does not have to have all of the paperwork from NYU come through as a university. So whenever you're ready to submit Maryland, you can. And if you decide that it doesn't work for you to do it in the next month, you can do it the month after. We don't need to say that we would like to have a December 8th deadline for you to commit to doing it and tell us, hey, I plan to go through that process, but I'm not going to do it right away. I'm going to restrict activity there for now, but I plan to go through it just so we can keep track and we can kind of ping you and remind you and just say, hey, it's been 2 months. Are you still going to do that? It's been 6 months. What's your plan? Or, kind of work with you to make sure that we stay on top of that and get you the necessary approval that you need to have that activity in Maryland. But the market research element, it starts at the bottom of page 1 under educational need, is something that most state authorization applications do not have. So this is new to us, new to you, and it's a little strange. So I wanted to bring that to your attention to kind of just talk through it a little bit. It basically is saying, why do you need to be in Maryland? And I wanted to explain where that question comes from. Maryland's process for authorization has the form submitted, program reviewers review the form, and then it's posted and it's announced to the Maryland education community for people to respond to. So they can, it kind of turns into an interesting back and forth with a fight for enrollments, right? So if it's a nursing program, for instance, you might say, okay, we want to have our program approved so that our nurses can do their clinicals in Maryland. And all of the other nursing programs might say, well, we don't want NYU to be able to have clinicals here. We want our students to secure the clinicals here. They're competitive to get. There's not many of them. And we don't think there's a need for NYU to be here. The University of Maryland's already here, and that's enough. So then those responses and that rebuttal will all come into us at my office, and then we'll be able to respond to them. So we'll be able to respond and say basically what you'll write here. And most people are writing to market need. There's a shortage of nurses nationally. Being able to offer our nursing clinicals in the state of Maryland will lead to 20% of the people who do so becoming a nurse in Maryland, usually for the next 10 years. And we're helping to fill your employment gap and your healthcare needs for geriatrics or pediatrics or whatever genre you focus on. So those are the kind of things that people are writing here. But everything else is pretty standard. It's asking for faculty credentials. Sometimes it'll say copies of the CVs, but again, if it's on your website, just insert a link. It asks the name of the courses. Sometimes it wants information that you would have in your course catalog, just a short description, and things like that. So we're available to review that as well, and we just ask that you let us know by December 8th if you plan to go through that process so that we can have an accurate number for budgeting purposes of how many programs we will be putting through in Maryland. So I guess with that, if you guys have any questions about either application or process, or you have an oddity in your program that you're unsure of, I'm happy to answer them or open a dialogue to work through some of that.